there is research already written and not just written, but empirical evidence. It's been studied. The theories have somehow been tested with methodologies and et cetera, et cetera. It's like, these just aren't opinions. These are research-based theories. We should seek more of that to help us get a better understanding of how we got to this point. When you're over, say, on that side of the Atlantic, you then realize how new this side of the Atlantic is. Those years that we talk about in terms of U.S. history, 1776. More recently, you hear about the 1619 project. Most people don't even know that the first settlement in modern present-day North America was not Jamestown. It was not a British settlement. The first European settlement here was in is it St. Augustine or St. Augustine, Florida. I don't know, people say things different ways, but that was the first European colony established in what is now North America, like the United States. We don't even get that little bit of information given to us so plain and clear, right? But that's because it was Spanish, not British. And that's why Florida isn't as included in the story of the original colonies, because it was more Spanish influenced than British influenced. You have just so many different little twists and turns where, I mean, we're one war away from everybody over here speaking Spanish. This is just the facts, right? And so you start looking at the critical events in history that like really carried culture and society to the next phase. We cannot afford to ignore colonialism and its impact in present day. And it's unfortunate because the bulk of the countries impacted by colonialism are Black and brown in Africa and in Asia. Of course, South America as well. It is something that I think we need to discuss more. And I want to just shed a little light on what I learned about it. And hopefully you find it somewhat interesting too. Staying over there in Europe though, I mean, you see buildings that are older than 1619, for example. And we're talking about the first people to arrive here that were forced, as slaves, I think was there 1619. But there are whole buildings still standing that are way older than 1619 in Europe. And then you go to, say, somewhere like Rome, and they've always talked about this idea of Western society. I never really understood what any of that meant until I went to Europe. This idea of the East versus the West and Western society, like I never really understood any of that until I was in my mid-20s in grad school living in Amsterdam. But understanding that really helped me, I feel, get a better view of what this thing actually is, what these countries are, what it means to be in power, and what people in power will do to maintain that power, right? Like it has been laid out over history for everybody to see. And there is research already written and not just written, but empirical evidence. It's been studied. The theories have somehow been tested with methodologies and et cetera, et cetera. It's like, these just aren't opinions. These are research-based theories. We should seek more of that to help us get a better understanding of how we got to this point, so that as we make decisions and try to put ourselves in position for what's to come, we can do that more strategically and with a more realistic view of what's to come. Fighting for equality, for example, I think is a waste of time, because when has it ever existed? I mean, what culture even? Like, it's just equal. Like, I'm curious, like, what is equality? Where is the equality? What cultures have equality? The men aren't equal to the women. The brothers aren't equal to the sisters. The rich aren't equal to the poor. What the fuck is equality? And why does it mean so much to you? I think that's a really good question. Oh yeah, it's gonna be a good one. It's gonna be a good one. We definitely finna get into this colonialism talk. Oh man, I can't wait. And everything I'm going to discuss is based off the research that I had to do to write my master's thesis. And my master's thesis was centered around a few concepts. And this is where we'll wrap up, and then we'll still get into the main show. The whole thesis was centered around this question. It was a question related to human rights violations and multinational enterprises. And I wanted to explore how a colonial link between a home and host country impacts the likelihood, or just impacts how that multinational responds to human rights violations. I wanted to know how a colonial link between multinational enterprises, I wanted to know how a colonial link between a home and host country impacted how a multinational enterprise responded to human rights violations. So for example, British Petroleum, UK-based, Nigeria, former British colony. How would, say, British Petroleum doing business in Nigeria, how would that colonial link between the UK and Nigeria impact British Petroleum's response to human rights violations taking place when they do business in Nigeria? That was the question that I had, and that was what led me down this wormhole of research around colonialism and etc. I think that's a good stopping point. Make sure you subscribe. This is definitely something different. This is your first time tuning in. Definitely go check out some of the previous episodes.